The wealthy man had it all: money, power, and a beautiful wife who adored him. His life seemed perfect on the surface. He had built a successful business empire over the years and enjoyed the finer things in life, from luxurious vacations to expensive cars. People looked up to him, and his reputation was untouchable. But deep down, he started feeling an emptiness, a longing for something more. His marriage, once full of passion and love, had begun to lose its spark. His wife, though kind and loving, was older than him. She had become more focused on maintaining their home and caring for their children. The connection between them had faded over the years. She was happy with the life they had built, but the man felt like there was something missing. Then everything changed when he met her, a younger woman who seemed to bring excitement into his life. She was beautiful, carefree, and full of energy, everything that he had been missing. The attraction was instant. They began spending more time together, and the man started to feel a rush of emotions he hadn't felt in years. The younger woman made him feel alive again. They went on spontaneous adventures, laughed together, and shared a connection that reignited something deep inside him. He found himself growing increasingly distant from his wife. The long, heartfelt conversations they used to have seemed to vanish. His wife had no idea what was happening, and the man kept telling himself that he was just going through a phase. But deep down, he knew that the connection with his wife was slipping further away. He couldn't ignore the undeniable pull toward the younger woman, and soon their relationship became something more. Eventually, the man made the hardest decision of his life. He left his wife for the younger woman. The pain was real, but he convinced himself that he deserved a fresh start. His wife was devastated, but she tried to understand. She wished him well, even though her heart was breaking. The man felt a mix of guilt and relief as he moved out of the house they had shared for so many years. He told himself that he was following his heart, and that was all that mattered. He married the younger woman soon after, eager to begin this new chapter of his life. The excitement of the early days carried them through their first year of marriage. They had big plans for the future, and he felt like he was finally living the life he had always dreamed of. His new wife was everything he had hoped for, and their life together seemed perfect. But as time passed, the man began to realize something. Despite the youthful energy and beauty of his new wife, something was still missing. The excitement that had initially drawn them together started to fade, and he found himself reflecting on his past more and more. He thought about the life he had left behind, about his first wife, and the memories they had shared. Would his life have been different if he had stayed? These thoughts lingered in his mind, but it was too late to turn back. The wealthy man had made his choice, and now he had to live with it. But little did he know, the twists in his life had only just begun. As the months turned into years, the man settled into his new life with his younger wife. At first, everything seemed perfect. They traveled the world, enjoying luxurious vacations, eating at the finest restaurants, and living in a mansion that was filled with the best of everything. The excitement from the early days of their relationship had not faded. If anything, it had grown stronger. They seemed like the ideal couple, young, successful, and in love. However, as the initial thrill of their relationship began to fade, the man started to notice small cracks in the perfect picture he had created. He had always been a hard-working businessman, driven by his ambitions, but now, with the constant distractions of their lavish lifestyle, he began to feel something he hadn't expected, a deep sense of restlessness. His younger wife, while vibrant and full of energy, was more focused on enjoying their life than building anything meaningful. She often spent her days shopping or going to social events, while he worked harder than ever to keep his business empire afloat. There was a quiet distance growing between them, and though they spent a lot of time together, the connection they once had seemed to be slipping away. It wasn't that he didn't love her anymore, it was just that things weren't the same. He missed the days when his life had a different kind of purpose, the days when he was more than just a businessman, when he was part of something deeper. He found himself thinking more and more about his first wife, the one he had left behind. He remembered their shared moments, their struggles, their victories together. They had been a team, and although their marriage had its challenges, he hadn't realized how much he missed that partnership until now. At first, he dismissed these feelings, telling himself that it was normal to have doubts, that every marriage went through rough patches. But with time, it became clear that something was missing. He started asking himself if he had made the right choice by leaving his first wife for a younger woman. The man was not one to dwell on regrets, but there were times when the silence in his new home felt overwhelming. He tried to fill the emptiness with more work and more material things, but nothing seemed to satisfy him the way he had hoped. His younger wife, though still loving and caring, seemed less interested in deep conversations or spending quiet evenings at home. She was constantly looking for the next adventure, the next thrill. For her, the perfect life was all about excitement and pleasure. But for the man, it began to feel like there was more to life than just living for the moment. As the years passed, he began to feel like a stranger in his own life. The man had everything that most people dreamed of: wealth, success, and a beautiful wife. But he couldn't shake the feeling that he had lost something important along the way. He had left behind the person who had been there through thick and thin, the one who had shared his dreams and fears. And now, as he looked at his younger wife, he realized that he was not as happy as he had hoped to be. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that he had been searching for something outside himself to fill the emptiness he felt. But the truth was, no amount of wealth or luxury could replace what he had lost. In the quiet moments, when everything was still, the man began to wonder if he had made a mistake, if he had sacrificed something that could never be replaced for a life of fleeting excitement. The man's life took an unexpected turn when his younger wife announced that she was pregnant, not just with one child, but with quadruplets. At first, the man was stunned. The news caught him off guard. He hadn't been expecting such a huge change, especially after everything he had been through. His mind raced with thoughts of how their lives would change with 4 babies on the way. He had never considered becoming a father again, and the thought of raising quadruplets seemed both overwhelming and exciting. His wife was ecstatic, and for a moment, everything else seemed to fade away. They began preparing for the arrival of their children, building a nursery, buying everything they could possibly need. The thought of becoming a father again filled the man with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. It was as if the excitement of parenthood would bring a new chapter to their lives, a chance to rebuild what seemed to be slipping away. As the pregnancy progressed, the man found himself feeling both proud and anxious. He couldn't help but wonder what kind of father he would be. His first marriage had ended in part because of his career and his inability to balance work and family. Now he was about to face a completely different challenge. Raising 4 children at once felt like an enormous responsibility, but it also brought a sense of excitement that he hadn't anticipated. He realized that no matter how much wealth or success he had accumulated, nothing could compare to the joy and love that children could bring into a home. His wife, of course, was glowing with happiness. She was thrilled by the idea of becoming a mother and was eager to embrace the changes that came with it. The couple worked together to prepare for the arrival of their children, and for a while, the man felt like he was finally living the life he had always dreamed of. The thought of his past life with his first wife seemed to fade into the background as he focused on the present. But as the months passed and the babies grew closer to their arrival, the man began to feel an underlying tension. He started to question his motivations for having children again. Was it truly about starting a family, or was it an attempt to fill the emptiness he had been feeling all along? The excitement of having quadruplets was overwhelming, but at times he couldn't help but feel as if he was trying to make up for something he had lost, a piece of himself that was still missing. When the day finally arrived, and his wife gave birth to the 4 babies, the man was filled with emotions he had never expected. It was a mix of awe, joy, and a deep sense of responsibility. The babies were healthy, and the couple's home was filled with the sounds of new life. The man felt a renewed sense of purpose as he looked at his children, wondering what their future would hold. But despite the joy of becoming a father again, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something left unresolved in his life. His relationship with his younger wife had changed in ways he hadn't anticipated. She was focused on caring for their newborn children, and though they shared the responsibility, he felt more distant from her than ever. The initial excitement of their new life together was starting to fade, and the man began to wonder if he had truly made the right decision. The quadruplets were a blessing, but they also brought a new layer of complexity to his life that he wasn't prepared for. As he watched his wife care for the babies, he couldn't help but think about his first wife and the children they had shared. In some ways, it felt like his past was calling to him, reminding him of the life he had left behind. The question lingered in his mind. Had he made the right choice, and would he ever find the peace he had been searching for? As the years went by, the man found himself caught between two worlds. His life with his younger wife and their 4 children had become his reality, but something deep inside him still nagged at him. Raising quadruplets was no small feat. The noise, the constant needs, the sleepless nights, it all came with challenges that tested his patience and his emotional strength. While his wife was fully immersed in motherhood, taking care of their children with love and devotion, the man began to feel the weight of responsibility in a way he had never expected. In the early days after the birth, the excitement had been overwhelming. He felt like a proud father as he held each of his children, watching them grow and develop. But as time passed, the initial rush of joy began to wear off. His life had become a constant routine, revolving around the needs of the children. It wasn't that he didn't love them. In fact, he adored them. But the pressure of raising 4 children at once left him feeling drained, both physically and emotionally. His relationship with his wife, too, had started to shift. She was a wonderful mother, dedicated to the care of their children, but she had become so absorbed in her new role that she seemed less interested in him as a partner. Their conversations were mostly about the children's milestones, their health, and the daily logistics of family life. There was little room for the spontaneous moments of connection they had once shared. The man missed the carefree days when they could talk about their dreams, their hopes, and their future. Now their life seemed to revolve around the demands of their growing family. At times, the man would retreat into his work, using it as an escape from the pressures at home. His business empire was still thriving, and he found solace in the familiar world of meetings, deals, and deadlines. But even in the midst of his success, he couldn't ignore the growing sense of emptiness he felt at home. The love he had once felt for his wife seemed distant, and the excitement of their early days together had faded into the background. As the children grew older, the man found himself becoming more reflective. He began to question the choices he had made, wondering if he had truly found happiness. He thought about his first wife, the one he had left behind so many years ago. While he had moved on with his new family, a part of him still held on to the memories of his first marriage. The relationship they had shared was different, less glamorous, perhaps, but full of real connection and shared history. He began to wonder if he had given up something valuable when he left her for his younger wife. Despite the joy of being a father again, he felt a sense of loss that he couldn't explain. He had everything he could want: wealth, success, and a beautiful family. But something was missing. His life had become a carefully constructed picture of perfection, but behind the smiles and the achievements, there was a nagging feeling that he had never truly found peace. One day, while spending time with his children, watching them play in the yard, he had a moment of clarity. He realized that while he had been so focused on building his empire and chasing excitement, he had neglected to truly connect with the people around him. His children needed him, not just as their provider, but as a father who was present in every way. And his wife, though busy with motherhood, still needed him as a partner. But even as he recognized this, he couldn't help but feel the weight of his past decisions. He had left behind the life he once knew, and now there were moments when he wondered if he had made the right choice. The man understood that life was never perfect, and that no matter how much he had achieved, there would always be a part of him that longed for the simpler days of his past. But for now, he had a family that needed him. He had to decide whether he would continue to live with the quiet regrets that plagued him, or whether he would fully embrace the life he had built. Years passed, and life continued to move forward for the man. He had built a family and a life that seemed perfect to the outside world, but inside, he remained unsure. The doubts that had crept into his mind when his children were born never fully went away. He found himself wondering whether he had made the right choices and whether he was truly happy. The excitement of the early years with his younger wife had faded, and the man felt a quiet distance growing between them. One evening, he attended a social event in the city. It was the kind of gathering he had grown accustomed to over the years, full of business partners, old friends, and people who admired him. He had always been good at putting on a mask, showing the world the confident, successful man he was. But this time, something was different. As he walked into the room, he noticed a familiar face, his first wife. At first, he wasn't sure if he was imagining things. He hadn't seen her in years, not since he had left her for his younger wife. She was standing across the room, talking to a group of people, but the moment their eyes met, something shifted. He felt his heart race, a mixture of surprise and guilt flooding through him. She hadn't changed much, still the same kind and caring woman he had once known so well. The years hadn't taken away her warmth or the quiet strength she always carried. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and he couldn't look away. He hadn't expected to see her here, and the suddenness of the encounter left him feeling unsettled. He was surrounded by people, yet he felt more alone than ever before. The man's mind raced with memories of the life they had shared, the good times and the struggles. Their marriage had been full of ups and downs, but there had been love, real love. And now, seeing her again brought back all the emotions he had buried for so long. Without thinking, he walked over to her. She noticed him approaching, and her expression softened. It was clear she hadn't expected to see him either. They exchanged polite greetings, and for a few moments, they spoke casually, as if no time had passed. But beneath the surface, both of them felt the weight of what had happened in the years since their last conversation. They spoke about their lives, his successful business, her new family, and how they had both moved on. Yet the man couldn't help but feel that something was missing. He asked about her life, about her children, and felt a pang of regret when he realized how much he had missed. He had chosen a different path, and while his life had been filled with luxury and excitement, he couldn't deny that there was something genuine and real about the life they had shared. It was a life built on connection, not just on material success. As they spoke, the conversation turned more personal. The man couldn't ignore the feeling that lingered between them, the unspoken acknowledgement of the love they had once shared. She told him about the family she had built after he left, about how she had found happiness again. Her eyes shone with contentment, but there was also a quiet sadness that the man couldn't ignore. It was as if, for both of them, the past was something they had to move beyond. But that didn't mean it didn't still matter. As the conversation ended, they shared a moment of silence. The man realized that seeing his first wife again had stirred up feelings he had buried long ago. The life he had chosen, wealth, success, and his younger wife, hadn't brought him the peace he thought it would. And now, standing in front of the woman he had left behind, he understood that some parts of his past would always be with him, no matter how much he tried to move on. Before they parted ways, they exchanged a few words of farewell. He walked away feeling conflicted, unsure of what to do with the emotions that had surfaced. He had come to the event thinking it would be just another night, but now he was left to reflect on the choices he had made, and whether he would ever truly find peace in his new life. After his unexpected encounter with his first wife, the man couldn't stop thinking about the conversation they had. It had stirred something inside him, something he hadn't realized was still there. The memories of their life together, the love they had shared, and the way they had built a family from scratch all came flooding back. He had moved on, or so he thought, but seeing her again made him question whether he had truly left that life behind. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing in his current life. He had everything that money could buy: wealth, luxury, a beautiful wife, and children. But it was clear that something deeper was lacking. He had always been driven by his ambitions and his desire for success. But now, with 4 children of his own, he began to see things differently. His work was no longer as fulfilling, and the excitement of his new life with his younger wife seemed to have faded. In the quiet moments, when he found himself alone with his thoughts, he began to realize that his past was still a big part of him. And no matter how much he tried to push it away, it would always be there. One afternoon, while sitting in his office, the man found himself looking at a photograph on his desk. It was a picture of his first wife and their children, taken years ago when they were still a family. He picked it up and stared at it for a long time, feeling a sense of longing and regret. It wasn't just about missing her. It was about the life they had built together, the way they had worked as a team. Their family had been imperfect, but it had been real, and it had been theirs. Now, with his younger wife and their quadruplets, he felt like he was living in a different world, one that was filled with all the things he thought he wanted, but lacked the emotional connection he once had. In that moment, the man made a decision. He needed answers, and he couldn't keep ignoring the questions that had been lingering in his mind for so long. He knew that the only way to move forward was to confront his past and the feelings that had resurfaced. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't something he could do alone. But deep down, he understood that he couldn't find peace until he understood what had gone wrong and why he felt the way he did. He decided to reach out to his first wife again. It had been years, but he felt that they needed to talk, to reconnect, and understand where they had both gone wrong. It wasn't about rekindling their romance. He knew that ship had sailed, but he needed closure, and he needed to understand whether the life he had built with his younger wife had been the right choice. He wasn't sure if he was ready for the answers, but he knew he had to ask. He contacted her, and to his surprise, she agreed to meet. They arranged to meet at a quiet cafe, the kind of place where they used to go when they were still married. The familiar setting brought back a flood of memories, and as he waited for her to arrive, he felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. When she walked in, the man was struck by how little had changed. She still looked the same, warm and calm, but there was something different in her eyes, an understanding that came from years of living without him. As they sat down and began to talk, the man realized that this meeting was more than just a chance to reflect on the past. It was an opportunity to learn, to understand how both of their lives had evolved since their separation. The conversation flowed easily at first, but it soon turned deeper as they discussed their children, their lives, and the choices they had made. The man listened closely, hearing things from her perspective that he had never considered before. In the end, the meeting didn't provide all the answers he was seeking, but it gave him something valuable: perspective. He had spent so many years focused on what he thought he wanted that he had lost sight of what truly mattered. Seeing his first wife again and hearing her thoughts on their past gave him a sense of peace he hadn't expected. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew that he couldn't continue living in the shadow of his past. The answers weren't easy, but they were a necessary step toward moving forward. After the meeting with his first wife, the man's mind was filled with new thoughts. The conversation had opened his eyes to things he had pushed aside for so long. He had spent years chasing success and a life of excitement, but now he realized that it wasn't enough to fill the deeper need he had inside. The time with his first wife had given him clarity, but there was still something left unsaid, something unresolved. He returned home that evening, his mind racing with questions. His younger wife, who had been so full of energy when they first met, was now focused on their children. She loved their children deeply and was a devoted mother, but their relationship seemed to have shifted. She spent most of her time caring for the quadruplets, and the bond they had once shared seemed distant. Though they still had moments of connection, the man couldn't ignore the underlying feeling of emotional separation. His heart was torn between the life he had chosen and the life he had left behind. The more he thought about it, the more he understood that something needed to change. He couldn't keep living this way, torn between the past and the present, between the two families that had shaped his life. He had to confront the truth, both to himself and to his younger wife. He knew that it wouldn't be easy, but it was the only way to move forward. One evening, after the children were settled for the night, the man sat down with his younger wife. They hadn't had a serious conversation in weeks, and the weight of the unspoken words between them hung in the air. He had to tell her everything. The doubts, the regrets, and the realization that he couldn't continue pretending that everything was fine. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves before he spoke. "Honey, there's something I need to say," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've been carrying around some thoughts for a long time now, and I can't keep them inside any longer." His wife looked at him, concern in her eyes. She had always been caring, always ready to listen, but he could see the unease in her expression. She had noticed the distance between them, but perhaps she didn't fully understand the depth of his feelings. "I've been reflecting on a lot of things," he continued, "on my past, on the choices I've made, and on our life together. And I need to be honest with you, I feel like something is missing. Not because of you, but because of me. I've been so focused on everything else, work, the kids, everything, that I lost sight of what truly matters." His wife sat silently, listening. The man felt the weight of his words in the silence that followed. He knew that this conversation wasn't just about him. It was about both of them, their relationship and where it had gone. He needed to acknowledge that he had been emotionally absent, even while physically present. He needed to take responsibility for the distance that had grown between them. "I love you," he said softly, "but I've been distant, and I know it's hurtful. I need to work on being here, with you, and with our family. I don't know what the future holds, but I can't keep living like this, unsure of what I want. I need to make some changes." There was a long pause as his wife processed his words. She looked at him, her expression a mix of surprise and understanding. She had known something was off, but hearing him speak so openly about it was a relief. It wasn't easy, but she appreciated his honesty. "Thank you for telling me," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I've felt it too, the distance. I've been so focused on being the best mother I can be, I haven't noticed how much we've drifted. But I want us to work on this. I want us to find our way back." They sat in silence for a while, just holding each other, feeling the weight of the conversation settle in. It wasn't a quick fix, and they both knew it wouldn't be easy. But it was a step in the right direction. They had both been so focused on their individual worlds, on their roles as parents and partners, that they had forgotten to nurture the bond that had once brought them together. In that moment, the man realized that the path forward wasn't about seeking answers from his past, but about building something new in the present. He couldn't change what had happened, but he could change how he moved forward. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew that he wanted to try, to truly be present in his marriage, in his family, and in his life. It was time to stop running from his feelings and start facing them head-on. The conversation wasn't the end of the journey, but it was the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where honesty, understanding, and a renewed sense of connection would guide their way forward. And while the future was uncertain, the man felt a sense of hope that had been missing for a long time. The man spent the next few weeks reflecting on the conversation he had with his younger wife. It wasn't an easy thing to face, admitting that he had drifted away from his own family, that he had neglected the emotional connection they once shared. But in the silence that followed, something began to shift. He realized that it wasn't just about making big changes overnight or seeking answers from his past. It was about slowly rebuilding what had been lost. It was about reconnecting, being honest, and showing up for the people who mattered most. He started small, taking the time to be more present with his wife and children. He began to look at his life through a different lens, focusing on the things that truly mattered: his relationships, his family, and his own happiness. He made an effort to spend more quality time with his quadruplets, playing with them, reading to them, and just being a father in ways he hadn't been before. It was as if the noise of the outside world, his business, his wealth, the pressures of success, had faded into the background. In its place, he found a sense of calm and purpose that he hadn't felt in years. One evening after dinner, the man and his wife sat together on the porch, watching the sun set behind the trees. The children were inside, playing, and for the first time in a long while, the couple was able to sit together in peaceful silence. The man turned to her, his heart full of gratitude. "I've been thinking," he said softly, "about how much I've taken for granted. You, the kids, our life. I've been so caught up in everything else that I didn't realize how important it all is." His wife smiled, her eyes warm and understanding. "I've noticed you've been trying, and it means a lot. I think we've both been so focused on other things, but I'm happy to be here with you, working through it together." The man felt a sense of relief wash over him. It wasn't perfect yet, but there was progress. They had taken the first step toward healing their relationship, and that was enough. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was truly home, not just physically, but emotionally. Their children, though still very young, brought an added sense of joy and purpose to their lives. The man found himself marveling at the little things: the way his kids laughed, the way they hugged him tightly when they wanted his attention, the way his wife looked at him when they shared a quiet moment. These small, everyday moments were the ones he had missed while chasing after success and wealth. In the weeks that followed, he and his wife continued to rebuild their connection. They started taking more time for themselves, even if it was just a few minutes a day to talk or enjoy a quiet meal together. It wasn't about grand gestures or big changes. It was about creating the space to be present with each other, to appreciate what they had, and to grow together as a family. The man knew that there would still be challenges ahead. Life wasn't perfect, and there were times when doubts crept in. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was on the right path. He wasn't trying to outrun his past anymore. He was embracing the present, the family he had created, and the life he had the chance to shape. One evening, as he watched his children playing in the yard, the man realized something important. He didn't need to have all the answers, and he didn't need to chase after the perfect life. What mattered most was the love and connection he had with his wife and children, and he was finally ready to invest in that, fully and completely. As the night fell and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, the man sat back, feeling a sense of peace that he hadn't known in years. His journey wasn't over, but he was no longer lost. He had found his way back to the things that truly mattered, the people he loved and the life they shared. And that, he realized, was more than enough.